is Tracy here to talk about part 2 of Iyanla Fix My Broken Life. If you remember in part 1, we left off with Iyanla telling Dwight that he had to do a breathalyzer and a drug test before he could come back to the house. So it's now the following day, and we have Dwight in the front yard, and true to her word, Iyanla is making him do the breathalyzer, and he's like out there in public in front of the whole neighborhood, and they can see him. It's like the breathalyzer that the police officers do, but that's what her producer had him doing. And so then I think they went in the house, and he probably did a urine test for the drug test, and Iyanla does reveal that he had no alcohol in his system, but he did have marijuana and cocaine. So I don't know if it was residuals or if Brother Man had gotten high before the show just to be able to cope and make it through the day. So Iyanla and Dwight are in the living room. And once again, he's on the sofa with this negative body language, like he doesn't want to be there. And like, Iyanla forced him to be there when it really was his choice. So I'm going to need him to get over that behavior because nobody has time for that. I mean, we're watching this foolishness unfold, and I think he's going to look back on this episode and, well, actually the whole segment, and realize what an asshole he was being. So as they're talking, he lets Iyanla know that he thinks that the whole process is a waste of time, and Iyanla tells him, it's not a waste of time because so like how I believe in life, if you learn something or you took something away from it, it's never a waste of time. And so what Dwight is taking away from this is that now he can't hide that he is an alcoholic and that he's addicted to drugs because that's been revealed. So it's now up to him to, face up to it and decide if he wants to get help. And Iyanla does offer him that help by offering to pay for a treatment center. And then just being the jerk that he is, he starts talking about, well, I appreciate the help, but, I'm the breadwinner in the family and I can't go away to a drug treatment center and take money out of my family's bank account. I'm thinking to myself, Negro, you doing cocaine, which is not cheap. Marijuana may be cheap, but I think it's like you have to buy it over and over. I've never done drugs, so I don't know. But it's money that you're wasting, and it's no different than, the money I used to spend every day on my Coca-Cola and my Reese's peanut butter cup. That was like $100 and some a month that could have been going into a savings account or something, but I was wasting it on Coca-Cola and Reese's peanut butter cup. And Iyanla kind of points that out to him, like, you're being a really big contradiction. And so he, I think he kind of realized how stupid he sounded and, considered the idea of going into rehab. Iyanla being the master of analogies, she used a really good one when she was trying to talk Dwight into accepting the offer to go into rehab, and she likened it to her being a surgeon and a patient comes in who's been shot, and she says, my first order of business is to make sure that none of the vital organs have been impacted by the bullet. And so she says, so what I'm seeing here in your situation is that your relationship with your kids is in critical condition and your marriage is pretty much on life support. And so I think that kind of waved the flag for Dwight and made him more open to going into therapy. But then she goes on and she asks him again, about, how did he get to this place? And so instead of going back to 1997, we're kind of moving up the ladder, and we might get to 2016 soon. But he mentions that in 2006, he had a cousin that he was really close to, and the cousin died. I didn't think that his wife helped him get through that, and that she was still, complaining about the past 7 years. And so Iyanla had to point out to him, dude, you cheated on her. You brought another child into the relationship. Of course she was still upset, and she, was still dealing with that. And to me, it went back to him saying about not wanting to take money from the family to go to rehab, but I am sure that he paid child support for 18 years for that child that he had out of wedlock. So I'm thinking every month when it come time to pay the bills, his wife was probably thinking she probably was mad as hell that she had to pay money to the child support people for, you know, your infidelity. And I'm not sure if Delisha works or not, but either way, you've impacted your family and, you know, what your family could be doing, because now probably a few $100s a month is going to somebody else's household to support them and the child that you created. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if somebody can help me out here. Iyanla said something to him or asked him a question, and I kept replaying the scene and replaying the scene to try and figure out what it was that she said. But his response was that he had did something 50 times or more. So I don't know if he cheated 50 times or more, or he was with the other woman 50 times or more, or what he had done 50 times or more. But if you guys know, can you leave that in the comments so I can know what he was talking about also. So one of the exercises that Iyanla did that took up a better part of the show was she took them outside, and there was this kiddie pool, and the pool was filled with dirt. And underneath the dirt was things that were representative of Dwight and Delisha's past. And so she told them to get into the dirt, and both of them, you know, act like they didn't want to get dirty or anything. But I think Delisha eventually got in, and then Iyanla had to make Dwight get in because, of course, you know, he's kind of hanging back, you know, don't really want to be a part of the process. And so then she gave them a 2x4, and so the goal was to each one of them would hold the end of the 2x4 and then dig in the dirt and pull out these things. And so some of the things that they pulled out, I think it was a girl baby and a boy baby, which represented them in their childhood that they never really had an opportunity to experience. And then I think Delisha pulled out I think it was an elephant, which represented her weight gain, dealing with the depression. And then there was a scale that represented her loss of weight, you know, as she was coming out of the depression. And then I think Dwight pulled out a crutch. I don't know, somebody had a crutch. I can't remember what the crutch was for. But I thought the most telling part was when he pulled out a pair of handcuffs. And we learned in that part that Delisha's father had actually went to prison. And, you know, she talked about how humiliating that was, you know, having to go and visit him in jail. And she promised herself that she would never, you know, have to go through that again. And then at some point, Dwight got arrested, but there seems to be some confusion because Delisha said, you know, she had to go visit him in prison, but Dwight said he didn't go to prison, that he went to jail. So either way, he was incarcerated. And, you know, and from Delisha's point of view, I had a friend who served a life sentence in prison. He actually died in prison and for murder. And I would go up to Stark. And for those of you who are not familiar with Stark, Stark is a state prison in Florida where they actually do the executions with the electric chair. And I could just remember taking that drive, and it was just so depressing, and just how when you went through the gate, you know, they had to search you, they took your purse away from you, and then you were in this room, and, you know, there was no privacy. The guards were walking around, and I know how it made me feel just being a visitor for a couple of hours. I could only imagine what his life was like, you know, having to live that every day. So I kind of liken that to Dwight and, you know, and his denial about having gone to jail, because if you think about it, Dwight has been in a mental prison for the past 19 years. Well, probably most of his life for his full 42 years, because he never really was able to be a child. He never, I think, had a close relationship with his mom. And then he's been in this marriage where he's cheated, and he just hasn't been the man, the husband, or the father that he's supposed to do. So I think mental prison, being on the outside where you're free to make good choices and not making those choices, may be a little more painful than actually being in prison where somebody else is making choices for you every step of the way. And one of the things that we learned about Dwight and Delisha is it was so telling, because Delisha said that she grew up, you know, around a bunch of strong women. And then Dwight said he grew up around a bunch of weak men. And it's funny how they found in each other the things that they despised the most. So Delisha, you know, because of the strong women who probably were degrading men and putting men down, ended up marrying the man that these women, you know, were putting down. And then because Dwight didn't have any good role models in his life, then he ended up getting married and treating his wife with disregard and disrespect, because he never learned how to treat a woman. Like Iyanla said, you know, we are the foundation and we carry that foundation wherever we go. Instead of attracting our soulmate, we end up attracting wound mates, people who are broken and wounded just like we are. And so we bond our hurt and disappointment together, thinking we're creating something better than what we had, and when in fact, we're just continuing that same pattern. And then there came a point where there was one more thing in the pool for Thalisha to pull out, but she was digging around and digging around like she couldn't find it. And Iyanla said it was a baseball bat. And I'm thinking, that little tiny pool, you knew that that baseball bat was in there, but she, I think, was afraid of what Iyanla was going to tell her that that baseball bat represented. So they ended up going to get the daughters, Avanti and Lakeisha, and bringing them out there to help, you know, the mom find whatever was left in the pool. So I must have missed something, because it ended up, she gave them another pole, so each one of them had like the 2x4. So there was two 2x4s, but it was only Thalisha and the two girls trying to hold the poles and dig in the dirt, because at some point Dwight got out of the pool and I guess he thought he wasn't part of the problem. So you really show how big of a part he plays in the breakdown of his family, because in that moment he abandoned his wife and his daughters and he allowed them to struggle. Iyanla, you did a good job with that one, and if he didn't see where he was part of the problem, then nothing was going to make him see it. So they ended up back in the house, and it was Dwight and Thalisha. They were in the living room, and Iyanla, I think, was upstairs. And so Dwight is at least trying to talk to Thalisha. But at this point, she's kind of like flipped the script. And so now she's going to be, you know, she's going to play the aggressive role while he's playing the passive role. And so she won't respond to him. And then Iyanla comes down and she's joking like, oh, you know, are you guys talking? And then, you know, he was like, well, I'm trying to talk to her. So Iyanla sits down with them. And I think at some point during the conversation, Thalisha says that the 17-year-old is sexually active and she's being very promiscuous as a result of everything that's going on. And I think this is where Dwight tells Thalisha that, you know, he's going to go into rehab, that Iyanla has offered him rehab. So that's a good thing. Okay, now Miss Iyanla, you know, she got more tricks in her bags than they prepared for, because next thing we know, here comes Mama Dwight. And let's hear what she has to say about this money and this scam that she pulled on her daughter-in-law. But let me put a pin right there for a second. The byline that popped up all of a sudden on Dwight said, Dwight, 42, construction worker, and father of 4. Okay, let's talk about this. Avante is the oldest child. She's like 22. Then we have the outside child, which is the son, who's probably about 20 years old. Well, no, they've only been married 19 years. So he's probably like 18 years old, 18 or 19. And then we have Lakeisha, who's their youngest daughter together, who's 17. So can somebody tell me where this 4th child came from and why we haven't heard about the 4th child throughout the show? So did Dwight have 2 outside children, or did Iyanla's editing team make a mistake and put 4 instead of 3? I'm being nosy, but I need to know, was there another child? Because then that means that the problem is deeper than any of them are talking about. And maybe it's a situation where the 4th child, well, the outside child we know about wasn't really featured on the show. So it seemed like if there was another child, they would have mentioned that child also. But anyway, maybe Thalisha has another child. No? I don't know. But anyway, I caught that, Iyanla, so y'all might want to touch up on that. So at 42, we see that Dwight still needs his mother. And I think we all need we never stop needing our mother. And Dwight feels that he doesn't have his mother to go to. When the mom comes in and they get to talking, we have the mom was sitting on one side, and then Dwight and Thalisha was sitting next to each other, and Thalisha was holding his hand as, you know, Iyanla was talking, and the mom was kind of, you know, giving her history on what's going on. And I love how Iyanla, you know, she intervened and she made Thalisha get up and she pulled the mom around so that she could sit next to Dwight. But what we found out, so here's what happened with the money. Mama needed to go Christmas shopping and she didn't have no money. So she either took a credit card from Thalisha or she took out a credit card in Thalisha's name, whichever one it was, she ran it up to the maximum and did not pay the bill. And so Dwight and his wife were stuck paying off this bill. And it wasn't so much that they were mad that she did that, but they were more mad because she never apologized to Talisha for what she had did. So Dwight's mom is, she's talking, and she shares with Iyanla that, they don't always invite her over for the holidays, and, and how that makes her feel. And I'm thinking, that's like some really manipulative stuff, because regardless of what your mama do to you, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Mother's Day, those are just days in the year that you are to go and spend with your mom, because she is your mother. It doesn't matter what has happened in the past. When those days come along, you're supposed to be with your mom. So I think they are continuing, 19 years later since this credit card issue happened, and they're still punishing the mother for what she's done. And Iyanla, she realizes that they're really being petty Betty, dealing with this situation. So, she points out to Dwight that, mama left her soap operas to come and deal with this mess. So, let's be open and honest, and let's put everything out on the table. Okay, so there's this passive aggressive mess again, because when Dwight tells his mom that he's going to rehab, and the mom said something like, oh, well, oh, it's about time, or thank you, God, or something like that she said. He, being the controlling person he was, immediately said, oh, she can't be happy for me, she's being negative. And because the mom didn't use the words or the tone or whatever that he wanted her to, then all of a sudden she's against him. Then Iyanla interjects, and she says something like, kryptonite to a man's soul is disappointing his mother. And I had to stop right there and think about it, because that's not always true, because there are some men that disappoint their mothers and don't have a problem doing it. And, maybe Dwight's not one of those people, but to say that it's kryptonite to the soul, I think was, kind of over speaking. But that was just my opinion. So as the show moves on, we get everybody together, and, it's that revealing time where, everybody can apologize to everybody else. And I believe that the mom apologized to Talisha for taking out the credit card. And then Avanti, when she's talking, she's pretty much, sharing how she felt, and that her mom didn't treat her as a daughter. And I thought it was funny, because the way she talked about her relationship with her mom is how many of us treat our girlfriends. And it's like, when things are going good with our man, we don't have time for our friends. Everything's about our man. But then when we break up with him, or we fall out, then we want our friends to be there and to comfort and support us and help us get through it until he finally calls and, wants us to come back, and then we abandon our friends again and go back to be with him. And so that's kind of how the daughter was explaining her relationship with Talisha. And so Talisha did break down and apologize and said that, and I don't know if Talisha doesn't have any sisters or if she's an only child, but she basically said that she realized that she was treating her daughter like a sister instead of, that mother-daughter relationship. So she did apologize. And when it came to Lakeisha, she could talk to her dad and tell her dad, how, she felt when, he wasn't paying attention to her, and how she wants them to be closer and have a better relationship and be able to talk about things. But honey, when it came to talk about her mama, Iyanla asked her, did she want to talk to her mom or tell her mom anything? And this girl was stone-faced, no emotion, no expression or anything. And she was like, she didn't want to talk to her mama. She didn't have nothing to tell her mama. And there was even a point where I think they all stood up, and then they were like facing each other and embraced at the end. And even though Talisha was apologizing to her, for how her childhood turned out, and she even she hugged the daughter, and I think the daughter hugged her back, but she still was emotionless. She had no expression. It was just, that was chilling to me, because once again we see that her issues haven't been resolved. And so it goes to Avante, and then Avante decides to revealed to the family that despite their objections, she has decided to move in with her boyfriend, and that they are more than welcome to come to their apartment and hang out with them, but they better behave and they better not be negative. And so now that we know that Avante didn't learn anything from this exercise, because if you remember in part 1, the dad was kind of picking up on something, that this guy wasn't right for her. So I kind of felt like her making the decision to move in with the boyfriend was just to spite the family and to, sort of like to have the last word and to stab a dagger into their heart, trying to get some get back. But, in the end, she's going to end up hurting herself. And so, that's just how that's going to play out for her. Hopefully it'll work out, but I don't think it's going to work out. As we get to the end of the show, Dwight acknowledges that he didn't realize that his behavior was causing his family so much pain. And of all the times that he cried in part 1, we finally see tears that actually feel like they're genuine. And Avante, she's receptive to his apology, but Lakeisha's just still very cold, very, just like her soul is empty. So, they're going to have to work with her. And the rehab that Iyanla is sending Dwight to is actually a 30-day in-house treatment program. And so I'm glad that she's turning them over to professionals, because, the show is great for entertainment purposes, but a lot of these people that be on the Iyanla show, they need some serious, deep tissue therapy, and I just don't think that Iyanla is qualified to do that. So to know that she did extend him the 30-day treatment. But then we find out, when they do the recap at the end of the show of what's going on since the show was recorded, we find out that, to nobody's surprise, that Felicia did not file for divorce, and that when Dwight got out of rehab, that they did get back together. Not that I wanted them to break up, but at least if you're going to stay together, at least work out your problems. Don't just stay to stay because you've been there 19 years and that's all you know, and you don't want to try anything different, or you're afraid to be alone, or afraid you won't find another man. So, and we find out that, after all Iyanla did for them to try and help them, that when the producers called Dwight, to get his recap, that he refused to return their phone calls, and that Talisha said everything was going great, but, they didn't hear from Dwight, and she's probably just masking and covering like she had been doing, for the past 19 years. So anyway, that's it. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your comments, rate the video, and share if you liked it. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.